over the years to give some shelter from the wind. The key was where it always was, under an ornamental chimney pot near the back door. Inside, she groped for the light switch. The house smelled damp, but she knew it was clean. She had come in November after the last of the students to scrub out. Bella had arrived with a couple of bottles of homemade wine, and they'd made a day of it. They'd ended up in the farmhouse drinking Dougie's whiskey. She slept in the guest room, Neville's room, as Bella called it, though as far as she knew, Neville hadn't been there for years, and had woken with the worst hangover of her life. It was the only time she'd ever slept in the farmhouse. Rachael switched on the Caligas cylinder outside, then went into the kitchen to put on the kettle for coffee. The kitchen was tiny, a modern extension, so narrow that she could touch both walls at once. She plugged in the rusty fridge, shut the door, and was relieved when it began to hum. The gas flame spluttered, but the kettle wasn't even warm. While she waited for it to boil, she walked through to the living room and shut the curtains to keep out the draught. Once they'd been grey velvet, but the sun had faded them in strips, and now the pile was quite smooth. There was a sofa, covered with an Indian bedspread which Rachael had brought the year before from home, a couple of armchairs which needed something to hide the stains, books spotted with mildew, and in one corner a fox in a glass case. The surroundings were so familiar that Rachael took no notice of them. She thought only about getting warm. Even inside it was so cold now that her breath came in clouds. The grate was laid with paper and kindling, but there were no logs in the basket on the hearth. There were matches on the mantelpiece, but they were damp. After several attempts to strike one, Rachael twisted newspaper into a spill and lit it from the gas flame in the kitchen. She nurtured the fire, remembering old tricks from the last time. The kettle squealed, and she made instant coffee from an emergency jar she'd brought in her bag. She drank it, crouched over the fire, tending it until she was certain it would not go out. She emptied the car, then put a pan of water on the stove. She'd have pasta for supper, and a glass of the wine she planned to have with Bella later. She took out the basket to fetch some logs. They were stacked at the back of a high, open-fronted shed, which also housed a rusting tractor and some piled bales of straw. The lights from the house didn't reach that far, and she carried a torch. Outside it was clear and icily cold. The stars in the wide sky, unpolluted by street lamps, seemed brighter than at home. Bella had arranged her suicide as efficiently as she had done everything else in her life. In the torchlight, she swung, hanging from a noose made of strong nylon rope. Her face was white. She had prepared for the occasion by putting on lipstick and the silk top Rachael had bought her as a thank you present after last season. Her black shoes shone, so the torchlight reflected from them. She'd pulled 2 bales away from the wall and climbed onto them to tie the rope around the beam. Then, when she was ready, she had kicked one away. Of course there was a note. She'd thought of that too. It was addressed to Rachael and apologized that she had to be the one to find the body. I couldn't put Dougie through that, and I knew you'd cope. It went on to remind Rachael that the kitchen door of the farmhouse was open, so she'd be able to get to the phone without disturbing anyone, meaning Dougie again. But there was no real explanation for the suicide. She just said that she couldn't take any more. She had known that Rachael would find her before the end of the evening because she had left the log bucket empty. Rachael had always realized that Bella was a clever woman. When Rachael saw Bella swinging, recognizable by the silk top, the smartly permed hair, the lipstick, but not really Bella, because Bella had never been that still in her life. She was furious. She was out of her mind with anger. She wanted to use the body as a punch bag, to thump it in the stomach. She wanted to climb onto a bale and slap the white, lifeless face. Because Bella had been a friend.